Meandering the Murray by Kayak. We haven't been on the Murray for 4 years. Time just gets away with you. In that time I have put on 5 kilograms, passed 60 years old, and become a grandfather. Johan is still Johan, handsome and wiser than ever. Once we got to Bringenbrong Bridge, we took the customary photos and started getting ready. We had been watching the water flow monitors for the past few days, and the water levels were around 1.7 m. I spoke to a few veterans of the Murray River expeditioners and was told that this was a great level to paddle. Johan and I were amazed, and a little nervous, about how quickly the water was flowing. You don't have a lot of time to react to an obstacle, strainer, a tree that has fallen into the river, with its branches effectively causing a hazard. Got the kayaks into the water, a quick kiss from the wives, and we were off. We had planned 3 exit points for the day, one at Tintralda 44 kilometers, a second at Clark's Lagoon Reserve 50 kilometers, and a third at Neil's Bend Reserve 68 kilometers. Looking at the flow, we immediately canned Tintralda as an exit, and agreed that the wives would meet us at Clark's, where we would assess how we felt, and either call it a day, or push on to Neil's Bend. We flew along at around 11 kilometers per hour. When we got to Clark's Lagoon Reserve, our support team were there with some additional cold drinks and snacks. Johan and I were feeling okay, so decided to push on to Neil's Reserve. Problem was that the temperatures were rising, and the additional 18 kilometers were paddled in 35-degree heat. This was a killer. But we go there. 68 kilometers is the longest distance that we have paddled, so we're extremely proud. Even more exciting was the cold beer that we were met with upon arrival at Neil's Bend Reserve. Tomorrow we have planned 45 kilometers. Let's see how we hold up. Day 2. We travelled 46 kilometers from Neil's Bend Reserve to Burroya Reserve, passing Walwa and Jingellic. The river was running well, and we were travelling at an average speed of just over 9 kilometers per hour. The big excitement of the day was that we went through 3 sets of rapids. The first was at Jingellic and was probably a grade 1 rapid. The second set a few kms later was a grade 1.5. The third set was probably a grade 2. Day 3 started off very wet. We almost cancelled the day, but then decided that as it was only going to be a 15 kilometers day, we would go ahead. We put in at Burroya Reserve, in the rain, and continued on. We made really good time and finished in 1.5 hours, paddling at just on 10 kilometers per hour. The fun part of the day was when we got to the bank at Kennedy's Reserve and I stepped out the kayak. I sunk up to my knees in mud. At Jasmine Cottage by 11:30 a.m. So we had a brunch of boerewors, egg and beans, a quick kip, and then went off to the Walwa pub for a well-deserved drink. Tomorrow we reach the edges of the dam, aiming to get to Waima Ferry. After getting stuck in the mud and having to climb the steep bank to get out yesterday, we were not looking forward to a muddy start to the day. Getting the kayak down the bank was a lot easier than getting it up, and we managed to avoid most of the mud getting in. Still enough mud to cause us to stop about 100 m down the river at the first rocky beach to clean it all off. This mud stinks. We still had some flow in the river, and managed a respectable 10 kilometers per hour for the first hour or so. Then we got into the dam itself. It was sometimes difficult to work out exactly where the river was running, as it spread out across the flats, and became very shallow in parts. We were lucky, skilled, and managed not to get grounded, although sometime the water was just about a paddle blade deep. Highlight of the day was probably that we moved accommodation to a spot overlooking the dam. What a stunning outlook! We had a great dinner and a few beers and wines, watching the sunset over dinner. Day 5, Waima Ferry to Hume Weir, 28 kilometers, started the day fairly early as we were worried about the wind and forecast storms, as we had some big open water crossings ahead. It was an interesting day, as John and I have very different strategies when it comes to cutting across open water to effectively cut the corner and save on distance. Johan prefers to hug the coastline, whereas I am quite happy, in the right circumstances, just to cut straight across a gap, even if that means being a couple of kilometers from the nearest shore. So our day was spent working on compromises. In the end, I think we managed to cut out about 5 kilometers of distance, although this did mean one long crossing from one side of the dam to the other, which was over 3.5 kilometers wide at that point. We finished up by 12.30, just as we heard a few peals of thunder in the background. All in all, a hard paddle day, as we had no current to help us along. On Saturday, the 30th of November 2024, we had a tough forecast for Albury with heavy rain in the morning, but the plan was to paddle about 2 to 3 hours, so we delayed until noon. We launched below the weir and quickly noticed the river was low. We had to paddle carefully, avoiding shallow stony beds and navigating around the split currents. At one point, we had to choose between two river splits. We picked the left, but almost immediately I realized it was the wrong choice. The current picked up speed, and we encountered fallen trees blocking the river. The current was strong, and we had only seconds to react. I called for Johan to backpaddle, and we managed to wedge ourselves against some tree stumps in deep, fast-moving water. We were stuck, with a 3-meter-high bank and no clear way out. After weighing our options, I called 000 for help. The response was impressive. Police, rescue teams, and even the VRA rescue stepped in. They were able to track our location using a special app, and after about 30 minutes, we heard the rescue boats approaching. The bigger boat couldn't get through, but but the smaller one made it across the stumps. The plan was for me to climb out, grab a rope, and get pulled into the boat, while Johan would climb along the bank. The extraction was nerve-wracking but calm, thanks to Ben and his team. Once aboard, we faced another issue. The river was so shallow we couldn't get back into the main river without running aground. We called in the bigger boat for help, but they also got stuck on the stone bar. The final solution was to walk through knee-deep water to the bigger boat, where the crew physically pushed both boats into deeper water. Eventually, we made it back to shore, but I was shaking from cold and shock. After thanking the rescue team, we headed to the pub to decompress. Later that evening, Ben called to say they'd recovered our kayak and gear. The rescue team had to cross the river on foot, carry the kayak up a steep bank, and ferry it back to us. Incredible! The VRA is a volunteer rescue team, and while they get some government funding, they rely mostly on donations. If you're looking for a good cause, consider supporting them. That night, we reflected on how much worse things could have been, and how grateful we were for the VRA's help. Thanks to our wives, Leslie and Mimi, for supporting us, and we are already planning our next Murray River adventure for 2025.